guys, what's up? Elk here, back with a video, and today I want to talk about Dracthyr as a priest. So starting in patch 11.0.5, they're adding Hunter, Mage, Priest, Rogue, Warlock, and Warrior as options to be the Dracthyr race. Now they've kind of changed this up a little bit and adjusted some of the racials of like what that actually looks like when you pick that. But so far this is looking like a really good option as a Shadow Priest. So in this video I'm going to kind of talk about what you get as a Dracthyr Priest and what this means for Shadow. Let's dive in. Alright, now before we dive into what it actually means to be a Dracthyr Priest, I will note that we don't actually have like a firm release date for patch 11.0.5 yet. Some people are saying, I think there was a roadmap that launched that said it was going to be something like November. It might be tied to the anniversary event, which is kind of why they were thinking that. It's possible this patch might come early. I would kind of guess with the amount of changes in the patch just in general, they might release it early with the event coming in November. But just so you know, this is going to be a couple months or a couple weeks at the very least before you'll get to change to Dracthyr. Now, before we dive into all of the racials, this is probably the first question in your head of like, okay, from a DPS perspective, is it competitive? So if we switch over and look at kind of early sims for what this looks like, you can see Dracthyr is by no means like the strongest racial that we have in the game. It's currently about 0.9%. Which the reason for that is it gives us Awakened, which gives you 1 mastery point, which as a Shadow Priest specifically, you get 0.5% mastery. That number will change depending on your spec. So I think for Holy, for example, it's just 1%. And that's just because everyone's mastery has a different coefficient. So if you remember from Dragonflight, you know, we hit that first mastery DR threshold at 19%. And then there are some specs in the game that have like 90% mastery. So it's going to be a different number for every single spec, but for Shadow, we get 0.5% mastery. So this is like bang on, pretty average for a racial. You can see like there's a Dwarf down here early on is also in that same kind of range. Night Elf Crit is down there. So like it's by no means like under or like that bad of a racial, but it's nothing like spectacular in terms of like DPS throughput when we compare to the kind of more overpowered choices, which is like Orc or Mechanome right now, or Draenei. Now, obviously, as the expansion goes on, this will change a little bit. We're used to seeing early on seasons, any racial that does like primary stat does really well early on, and then as the expansion goes on, the secondary stat ones kind of scale up. So I would expect that as we go to like season 2 or season 3, this will start evening out a little bit more, but we'll see what it looks like at that time. So if we actually go look at Dracthyr itself, there's a lot to cover as far as cool things about being a Dracthyr Shadow Priest, but by far the coolest one and just the most useful one is going to be the mobility. So this is one of the things that we've been talking about as a priest for a long time, and that our mobility options are just not that good. Well, guess what? Dracthyr just kind of fixes part of that. If you didn't know, Dracthyr kind of get the ability to do these little like leaps, these leap effects. If we go to the spell book, it actually does have a name. It's called Glide. That has a 1-second cooldown, and you can activate this by double hitting spacebar or double jumping. And what that does is it surges you forward a little bit. And this is, if you compare to just like walking around like a straight path, this is 50% faster than doing that. Now, obviously, we do have things like Body and Soul and Angelic Feather. It's going to be pretty comparable to that, but this is on a 1-second cooldown. So from a movement perspective, you get access to this all of the time as a Dracthyr, and so you're just much more mobile when you have to move somewhere than you would be otherwise. Now, obviously, when you're in this phase, you can't cast any spells. Now, if you are Void Weaver, you could still cast Void Torrent while moving and still do this combo. But otherwise, you are still limited to whatever instant cast spells that you have. Shadow Priest right now, if you're playing Archon, is roughly like 40% instant cast, give or take, 40-45%. So you can kind of pair that with this. But if you think of all the times where you just had to move from point A to point B in like a raid fight or whatever, having this like effectively no cooldown movement ability is going to be super nice, particularly as a Shadow Priest. Now, if we dive into some of the other things that you get access to as a Dracthyr, like I said, we already called out the Awaken passive, which is the 0.5% mastery, but there are some other things that you get as well. The two kind of really nice ones, if you're particularly a fan of Mythic Plus, is you get access to Tail Swipe at a 3-minute cooldown and Wing Buffet at a 3-minute cooldown. So Wing Buffet is a kind of a in front of you knock, and then Tail Swipe is a enemies around you knock. So if we kind of come over here, we'll go ahead and do tail swipe here. Tail swipe will work with everything around your character. And then if we go wing buffet is only in front of your character. But these are effectively new displacement abilities that you get access to as a Dracthyr. So we already have Psychic Scream, which is another melee one. So as a Dracthyr, you effectively have 3 melee range stops, which is a lot more than just the one that we had before. So that's pretty awesome. Now they are on 3-minute cooldowns, so it's not like you can spam these by any means, but it is just extra little bit of crowd control that you get access to as Dracthyr. You do have a couple other things, like you get 2% perception, which is like a crafting thing, not really that big of a deal. There's some other things as well. Of course, you can just dragon ride as Dracthyr. So if you didn't know, you have this soar ability. You can go up and then you have your normal dragon riding stuff without being on a mount. It's just on your character. Obviously, this isn't like anything to do with combat, but it is pretty cool to look at. It's pretty fun. Now, there is another thing as well. A lot of people aren't the biggest fan of how Dracthyr itself looks. If you didn't know, there is actually a visage form where you can toggle between, I think it's Blood Elf for male, and I think it's Human for female, something like that. And you can be Dracthyr as Horde or Alliance if you didn't know. But with this, you can, they've made a change so that as a non-evoker, you can actually stay in this form and do your whole rotation. So if you're just sitting here, you can still cast Mind Spike. All of your abilities will still keep you in this form. So in the case of if you don't really like that dragon model, you can still play as this. The only caveat is whenever you do any of like the dragon riding stuff, it will transform you back into that form. But then you can choose like what's your default out of combat if you do prefer one over the other. Now, the other kind of thing I'll talk about when it comes to visuals is with the evoker itself. There was one kind of thing, I was curious how they were going to do this, and we'll show you what it looks like normally. We have a cooldown called Dark Ascension. If you didn't know, Dark Ascension gives us wings. This is the animation for Dark Ascension. Well, as a Dracthyr, you already have wings. So what they actually did was they changed it. So when you have Dark Ascension active as a Dracthyr, you get like purple glowing effects on your actual wings of your character instead of the kind of Dark Ascension wings. I think this is just straight up really cool. I would actually love it if this was just almost baseline like glowy effect on your character, because again, the normal form just gets the wings. They don't get that extra glow effect. Honestly, I think it's just super cool, super neat. So yeah, that's Dracthyr in a nutshell. I don't know how much of this will be changed. Like I said, we have probably quite a bit until this becomes super relevant, but I know I'm kind of looking forward to playing as this, especially because I can just play Blood Elf if I don't like the way that the dragon form actually looks. But I think from a mobility perspective, this is pretty awesome. It's just a question of if I'm willing to give up Dwarf Stone form, which is pretty awesome utility as well. So let me know what you guys think. Are you interested in playing Dracthyr as your Shadow Priest? Do you absolutely hate it? Do you love it? Let me know what you think in the comments below. And we'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching, guys.